Good evening and welcome to EmpowerU. It's good to have so many of you come out on this bad weather night, and we're sorry for those that didn't make it. Hopefully they'll get online and see it. I'm Betty Overstreet, the Community Relations Director for EmpowerU. And just to give you a little bit of history, EmpowerU started in 2011. It was founded by Dan Regenald, who is also the founder and CEO of Frame USA. His vision was for us to have classes on a wide, diverse number of topics. We try to have classes that you'll enjoy. We try to have classes that will empower you. Most of all, we like to educate you. So we want you to learn things you don't know anything about, because that's what we do. We learn when we put these together. Most of all of our classes are live streamed. So if you know somebody that wanted to come that couldn't make it tonight, the class will be on our website within a day or two. So you can go on and even if you want to go back and see it again yourself, it'll be there. We welcome any feedback that you might have, good or bad. You can go to info@empoweruohio.org and leave your comments. We also welcome suggestions of future classes. We're always looking for ideas. And if you do have a suggestion, hopefully you'll know somebody that can talk about it, because that really helps. Also, since EmpowerU is run strictly by donations, towards the end of the class, we will pass around our red buckets. And if you'd like to give a donation to help further what we do, we appreciate any amount that you might have. Are you going to take questions during your presentation? Or would you rather wait?
I'd rather wait, but if there's something you don't understand, please ask now.
Okay. If you can hold your questions till our speaker is finished with his presentation, please raise your hand when you have a question and wait for one of us to bring the microphone to you so that everyone in the room, and especially those online, can hear the question. And next, I would like to have Dan Regenald, who is the managing board member of EmpowerU, come up.
Thank you. You want to help me with the big drawing tonight? Sure. We've got not one drawing tonight, we've got two drawings tonight, so get your tickets out. And the first drawing is one of our real barnwood frames from Frame USA for your holiday pleasures. The ticket ends in 540. Mr. Jay Janis back there. Let's give him a round of applause. Mr. Janis, thank you. And then the second, we might have had a little electrical problem there. The second set of prizes are from our sponsor, Creative Therapy, some mood magnets. And these are a fun little thing. And actually, one of my proudest things that I own is a poster that looks just like this, that was signed by a name that seems like he hasn't been around for a while, and that's Jim Borgman. It's up in my office, and I look at it every day. So let's pick another number. Number 541. All right, Ken, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Betty. So we have a surprise guest tonight. It's Pat, right? Oh, Paul, I'm sorry. I wrote down Paul, and I knew that wasn't right. We sure like the transparency. We had the library in back in April to talk about their levy that was going on the ballot. And they did a presentation. At the start of this semester, they contacted me and asked me if they could come in and give you a follow-up on what they've done with the monies that they're going to be getting from your sales tax money. So Paula Bream is here tonight. She's going to take a couple minutes and tell you about it. So come on up.
Thank you, and I won't take much time. I appreciate that. Thank you all. Hello. As Dan said, I'm the executive director of the Public Library of Cincinnati, Hamilton County, and last May, the taxpayers here in Hamilton County were generous enough to vote a tax levy for the library just north of 60% positive. So we had gone to a lot of groups and explained what our need was, and we just didn't want to just come to you when we were asking you for something, wanted to come back and let you know what we were doing in, with the funds that you had provided to us. Now, the levy funds will not actually be coming to the library until April of 2019, but we are doing some planning, and we are preparing for some things as we go along. Remember, those monies were mostly for our facilities, because we have 40 branch libraries and a main library downtown. We have just under 1 million square feet of space in our facilities, and we have many buildings that are older. 7 of them are 100 years old or older. 3 of them are not handicap accessible currently. 3 others are only partially handicap accessible. I could go on and on and on, but just so you have a little more context, the average age of a building in our library system since it was renovated or built or touched really is 40 years. So if you add it all together, they haven't really been improved or reimagined in some time. So since we have the levy funds, we've been planning for the best way to move forward in a conscientious, thoughtful way, while also working on the 3 buildings that are not handicap accessible, because that's just not acceptable to have those in that condition. And we have contracted with an architect to work on the Price Hill, Madisonville, and Walnut Hills branches. Even though we don't have the levy funds yet, we are preparing to do that. Meanwhile, we have also begun the process for preparing for a facilities master plan, because 100-year-old buildings, it's impressive they still work, that they do it all. I don't have very much in my life that's 100 years old that I go, well, it still works and I can still use it. I mean, that's rare, but they really are coming to the end of their life, and we need to look at them. It was a great legacy that a generation gave to our users and to our county, and we want to take seriously the fact that we may be at another generational moment, and what do we need going forward, not just for the next year or 2 or 5, but 10 or 20 or 30, so that we make those tax dollars really have the most impact. So we are going to see if we can get a group in here who is an expert in this area to work with us in the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months. You'll probably be seeing the library out in a lot of communities. We're going to talk to users about what they want from the library, what services they think we should have in the library, how they would like those facilities to work, because we don't want to come up with all the ideas. We want to hear from everybody in this room. The other thing I do want to say to the point about what's important, we did work with our board to come up with some planning principles as we move through this next stage. And I do want to mention that the things that we're prioritizing as we go through the spending of the levy funds and planning for our facilities, maximizing access, transparency, customer focus, sustainability. We want to continue to be industry leading in our excellence, and we want to be inclusive. So I know those are important things, and that's what we're going to be focusing on as we move through the planning process. Look for more information. I could go on and on, but I appreciate the few minutes, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or you can always contact us and we can give you more details as we move along. If you go to our webpage, we're going to make sure we're providing updates so that you know what's going on at the library. We're having community engagement sessions right now in Price Hill, because that is the branch we're working on, and look for more of those throughout the county, again, over the next 12 to 18 months. So I really appreciate you giving me the time, a little bit of a surprise, and sir, thank you for providing a few minutes here before you talk as well.
Any quick questions for Paula on the library? I just have a quick one. My wife was kind of under the weather, and I took her to the library. She's absolutely one of your best customers. And we got there about 5 till 10. I was just super surprised the library didn't open until 10. Super surprised. Do they all not open until 10?
Gosh, that's such a great question. So when we had our budget, I'll try and keep this short.
Okay.
When we had our budget, we had a bit of a budget crisis in the early 2000s, and we lost all of our state funding, or a lot of our state funding, and that's what we've been trying to climb out of that hole. And at that time, we had to adjust a lot of hours. So we have some branches that are open 44 hours, some that are open 48, some that are open 52, some that are open 60, some that are open 67. So we have 10 large branches that open at 10 a.m. The main library opens at 9 a.m. Most days, except for Sunday. And we do have some other libraries that open at noon some days. And I'm very interested in trying to expand those hours. And as a matter of fact, we just expanded some of our 44-a-week hour branches to 48 in a neutral, budget neutral way by changing some organizational structures at our main library. So again, I do think we can expand those hours. We're trying to take a hard look at where we staff and put our staffing resources, because I agree with you. It would be really great if we could have at least some locations that have longer hours. That's very important.
And how long have you been executive director?
I have been executive director for just about a month.
All right, well, welcome. Are you from Cincinnati? Or?
I am. I was the interim director. I grew up on the west side of town.
West side, best
yes,
side, right?
West side, best side. All right. And, so I lived there, and I went to UC. I went to IU. I lived in Indiana.
I'm a Hoosier too.
Hey, my husband's from Evansville.
Nice.
I love it. So I lived in Indianapolis for a bit, northern Indiana. Was out in Kansas City. And loved when I was from northern Indiana. When I left, the people, they said, oh, it's so flat. Why are you going to Kansas City? And I thought, we're in northern Indiana. It's pretty flat here. So I lived there, and I came back here about 15 years ago.
Okay. Well, listen, Paula, if you'd leave your email address back there, we'll put Paula's email address on the class listing. If any of you have any questions, you can jot her a note.
Please.
Let's thank her for coming by.
And I appreciate listening to me.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Have a great night. A couple things I wanted to go over with you. I wanted to introduce you to our team. We've got Bill Roll, our treasurer, back there. Let's give him a round of applause. We've got Jay, our producer, back there. Let's give him a round of applause. And we've got Betty Overstreet, our community relations director. We're glad we've got a great team. So, 2019. We've got just one session left to go. It's on Monday night. It's on President Abraham Lincoln. We'll be visiting EmpowerU. It's going to be a great night. We've got a really big turnout for Monday night. So if you're going to come, please register. And thanks to everybody online for joining us tonight. We hope a lot of the people who couldn't make it because of the weather are with us. But Monday night, our guest, Be On Time, will start out by enacting the Gettysburg Address, probably the most famous speech in the history of the United States. From there, he'll take you through Lincoln, just all sorts of quips about Lincoln's times, things he did, people he met, thoughts about different people. It will be a great night, especially for kids. If you have kids, bring them. It will be something that they'll remember for a long time. So after Monday night, geez, EmpowerU people, we just get to eat a little turkey and enjoy a couple months off. But we're going to start again real soon looking for great classes in 2019. If any of you have any ideas, like Ken here just gave us an idea for a class, jot us a note because we'd love to hear what you have to say. And one other thing I just wanted to talk about, I talked about this the other night, if you could put this up, Jay, and that's our Fill the Truck initiative. This is our 9th year of this initiative, and essentially what we're trying to do is to fill a semi-truck with personal care items to give to 7 great charities. If you feel like you'd be interested in helping us, grab one of these bags on the way out, fill it with cans, canned food, some personal care items like shampoo and toothpaste and maybe a toothbrush or something, and bring this back to us the week before Christmas. We've got 7 great charities that we give these products to. And we're going to give them all to them around Christmas. And last year we had about 47,000 items we donated. So if you could help us, we'd greatly appreciate it. So our guest, Michael Patton, we're so glad to have him tonight. And this is a class I've wanted to do for a really long time. Michael and I met in 2006, Michael? 2005, 2006, when we worked together on the jail tax levy in Hamilton County. We were out on the streets every day. We got to know each other pretty well. He was an incredible volunteer, an incredible worker. And I've kind of watched his reading over the years, and we kind of didn't see each other for a while. But really, he's a professional engineer, so he's going to give that kind of a take on tonight's subject. And he's worked locally for 25 years in the aerospace industry. He's interested in alternative energy, film, history, especially the history of American Indians in the area and of Cincinnati when it was a frontier. He's a frequent contributor to Street Vibes, the biweekly paper of the Greater Cincinnati Coalition for the Homeless, which is sold downtown. He also comes to a lot of EmpowerU sessions. He's learned much about the news, and even histories are so often he's found have been quite misleading. One of his quotes is by Chesterton and is appropriate whenever your views and actions are taken outside the norm. A dead thing can go with the stream, but only a living thing can go against it. Michael Patton.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, I'm glad to end with that quote because a lot of what I will be showing here will be going outside the norm. So, hold on. You know, I think some of it's pretty solid, but there'll be some things here you will not heard. I'm going to start with a short video as to what the electrical grid actually is. I'm familiar with it. I'm an engineer, but a lot of people probably are not. So this is just be about a 3-minute video showing. You've seen the parts, but this is how they fit together.
The electrical grid. The electric grid is the network through which power is generated, transmitted, and distributed to consumers. The electric grid is broadly made up of 3 main components: generation, transmission or distribution, and consumption. There are several key pieces of infrastructure that are built to support the delivery of electricity to consumers. It is comprised of these components: generating plants, where electricity is produced; transmission lines, infrastructure that allows electricity to be transported over long distances; substations, where electricity voltage is increased or decreased; transformers, the mechanisms that actually increase or decrease the electricity voltage; distribution lines, infrastructure similar to transmission lines but for lower voltages of electricity. The grid was created to solve the problem of geographic separation between electricity production and consumption. Electricity is often produced far from where it is used, so infrastructure needs to be built to connect the two. Prior to the invention of the modern grid, electricity producers each developed their own distribution systems for delivering electricity to customers. This system was costly and often led to underused infrastructure and wasted electricity. The modern grid was invented to allow various producers to share infrastructure for production and distribution, which led to increased reliability and lower costs. So how exactly does the grid work? After electricity is generated, the voltage is stepped up at a substation. This voltage increase allows electricity to travel long distances while minimizing the amount of electricity lost. The electricity then travels along transmission lines, either overhead or underground. Once it reaches its destination, another substation steps the voltage down to a level suitable for distribution lines that deliver electricity to consumers. The electrical grid provides electricity to various consumers with varying needs. For instance, industrial consumers are large facilities like manufacturing plants. Commercial consumers are office buildings or high-rise towers, and residential consumers are individual homes. The electrical grid is one of the most important inventions in our modern world. The centralized nature of the grid has made it an ideal structure for large-scale electricity production. However, some of the grid's infrastructure is outdated and is not capable of accommodating small-scale electricity generation technologies. The smart grid is this generation's answer to the electrical grid's shortcomings. The smart grid is simply the electrical grid enhanced by information technology. This turns the electrical grid into an intelligent network that allows for real-time information about electricity production and consumption and more efficient incorporation of small-scale electricity generation sources. As the electricity power supply mix changes, the demands on the grid for reliability, efficiency, and cost effectiveness will continue to be a complex challenge. So that's the electrical grid.
Okay, and I'll be referring to different parts that you just heard throughout the presentation. Now, I thought it was remarkable. My mother was born in 1933 in a small town in Iowa. She remembers getting electricity. She remembers cleaning kerosene lanterns. She did not like it. And they heated with wood and coal. Grandma cooked with wood, coal, corn cobs, whatever they could get a hold of. Grandpa had a gas station, but the gas station did not run off of electricity. There was a lever in the back of the pump. You pumped the gas out of the ground into a tank on top of the pump, and the gravity let the gasoline run down into the car. Now you compare that to what happened recently after Hurricane Sandy. And just in 2012, 8 million customers lost power. No light, no central heat. Gas stations closed because they had no electricity. How are you going to get gasoline to run your generator if you don't have some already stored? People had to drive, many miles to get to a gas station that was open. New Jersey, about half of them were closed because of electricity. They instituted gas rationing. We've become utterly dependent on electricity just in one lifetime. So I was also thinking, when I said utterly dependent, it's not just what I was talking about, that you think about the lights and the power and the heat, but it's also the water. That's extremely important. Telecommunications, food distribution. People in New Orleans after Katrina, sure, even the areas that didn't flood, they had no food distribution. That was part of the reason why they had to evacuate New Orleans. They couldn't get food in. So banking, internet, medical services, all those are dependent on electricity. I don't think we really realize that almost everything we do today is dependent on the electricity. We don't have to spend much time on this. There's some examples. 2016, it was the best data I could find. Due to hurricanes, a lot of people went without electricity for days, and that was just on the average. Okay. Causes of electrical grid failure. This is something I've thought about. Okay, like today. I said at one point in time, 200,000 customers were without electricity, and shortly before I came here, it was down to 100,000. And this number will go down, but they never really tell you how long it took the longest person to get the electricity. And I started to think about this and pay attention to all the different causes of why people were losing electricity. And I started doing research. I'm not covering everything, just what seems to be pertaining to us here in Cincinnati. Of course, today, what we have was the weather. This was ice forming on tree limbs, which broke and fell on the distribution lines. Those are the lines that lead to your house. I'll give a couple examples. Lost power for 3 days and then for 5 days. And that's part of what I'm talking about, 5 days. Okay, I made it through, but was 5 days the most I could lose electricity for? What if it was more widespread than what we had? Weather isn't too bad because it's local. The utility crews come in from outside. There's a reciprocal agreement. All the utilities in the country have reciprocal agreements where they help each other out in these kind of cases. They can mobilize huge amounts of manpower for a weather event. And that's why we get it done, though even here in 2008, it still took me 5 days to get my power back. Sure.
I have a completed getting the electricity back up.
Yes, that they have.
But that was a huge task.
Yes, it was a huge task. And that's because Puerto Rico is an island. Normally, and you've seen the utility crews, you know, they'll come in from outside, they drive towards the area. Actually, they stop outside of the area without power, you know, and put up in a hotel. And then they kind of work their way in and restore power to the blackout area.
The rough terrain was a problem too, wasn't it?
Yes, but okay, Puerto Rico is an island. First off, it was a category 4, I think, by the time it hit Puerto Rico. Ike was not a category 4. Okay, you know, it was devastating. The entire island was out. You could not drive these trucks to Puerto Rico. And sometimes I wonder if they themselves realized that, because I saw some of them were complaining, look how many trucks came to help out after Harvey and Irma. Well, excuse me, they could drive there, you know. You'd have to load them onto transports, you know, ships, and then you have to unload them. The logistics are so much worse. And also, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico was after Hurricanes Harvey and Irma. So already they used up a lot of the supplies. I never seen this. I think that must have been what happened. I know that happened to food distribution, food supplies. And I'm sure it must have been they finally started running out of poles and wire and small transformers. But yeah, but we don't have to worry about a category 4 hurricane here, hopefully. So like today, relatively quickly, but what's the worst? I was out for 5 days. Is that going to be the maximum? Because as an engineer, you know, just because that's the worst that's happened so far, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the worst that can happen. This one worries me, and this one actually worries FEMA. This is a coronal mass ejection, a huge solar flare, which happens from time to time. Most of the time, these things escape from the sun and miss. But sometimes they can hit the earth. And this could be a major event because it's going to be widespread. It's not going to be a local storm like we had today. This could cover like half of the United States easily. It disrupts the magnetic field. I mean, we're talking about charged particles from the sun. We're talking about interacting with the Earth's magnetic field. Not a good thing. Because it starts creating its own electric currents, and it distorts the Earth's magnetic field, which also can create electric currents. And the problem is that the grid is hundreds, if not thousands of miles long. And it, you know, you add up, you know, might be just 10 volts per mile, but you put that up over 1,000 miles, you've got 10,000 volts now that you didn't have before. This is a chart I found, and you don't have to look at this in detail, but this is kind of an example of the intensity of these storms that have hit. There was a huge one in 1859. There's been some other big ones, what did I say, 1921, 1938, the so-called Fatima storm. These were so bad, the 1859, 1921 storms, that the telegraph wires, which could span hundreds of miles, there were sparks coming out of the telegraph key, setting the papers on fire that the operators were using to write down the messages. They were so bad that they actually sometimes disconnected the batteries. They didn't need batteries. This thing was self-powered. Now what that's going to do to modern electronics and our modern grid, not good. There's been examples in some northern latitudes and one time in New Jersey, a relatively minor storm. melted down a major transformer. These things seem to happen every 50 to 100 years. We could be due. Yeah, added current. Yeah, there we go. There's some more information there. FEMA estimates 5 to 10 years for a full recovery on one of those major storms like that we had in 1921. Almost 100 years ago, we're due. Not all areas of the country are equally affected. It has to do with the soil. I don't think we're so lucky here. We'll probably be affected. And this, like I said, there was a 1989 storm caused blackouts in Quebec, Maryland, California, Arizona, Sweden. A $10 million transformer in New Jersey was destroyed. Fortunately, there was another one that they were able to grab for a plant that was under construction. But those transformers, remember they were talking about the large transformers? Those are the key. We no longer make them in the United States. We have to order them from Europe or from, guess who, China, and it can take 3 years. And if they're affected by the solar storm too, who do you think is going to be the #1 customer on their list? It's probably not going to be us.
Michael, we have a question here. Sir,
Yes,
sir,
yes,
would
Bill.
you, sir, would you speak into the microphone?
I'm Bill. Mike knows, but you
Yeah,
know.
he's a friend of mine, so.
When you're talking about a solar flare before 1900, were they aware of what had caused that back before 1900, or you know because just looking back at the records, figuring it must have been a solar flare?
They knew, they tied it at the time with the solar flare. We did not have the grid then, but like I said, we had the telegraph network. They knew there was a connection. They didn't understand. I guess only until maybe about 20 years ago that they finally figured it out. It wasn't the flare itself. It was all these charged particles that came from the sun at the time of the flare that was causing all the disruptions. There was aurora borealis like crazy. They saw them in Cuba. You know, they said there was reports that they could read a newspaper at night just from the aurora borealis. It was beautiful. And it would have been probably very dark except for the auroras because we might have lost the grid. There are contingency plans talked about where they will shut down the grid. Problem is, they've never tested it. We don't know for sure if that's going to work. Okay, physical attack. Yeah, this is another biggie. And you can go and find it once you know what you're looking for. In Metcalfe, California, there was a group of armed men. It was planned. It wasn't just one, it was several. They took out a substation with weapons fire. They found little piles of stone at the firing positions. They had, somebody had a flashlight to signal when to begin firing and when to stop. They went and punctured the protective cases around the transformers, so all the cooling fluid leaked out. The transformers could be rebuilt. Also, this was in the spring, so it did not take down a large portion of the grid. There was enough electrical capacity, but this is very worrisome. As I point out here, and you can research it yourself, the timing is very suggestive. This happened the day after the Boston bombing attack, the explosion there, and it happened the day before the attack in West Texas of the fertilizing plant, which killed 15 people. That was sabotage. So one day, Boston bombing on the East Coast. The next day, you have attack on the Metcalfe substation, which was a professional job, if I can use that term. And then you have sabotage in the West Texas fertilizing plant, which people don't talk about, but it happened. There's people who do not like us. I think this was a demonstration of what's possible. I don't have any inside information on this, but you can easily check this out. there were hearings in Congress about it, which the Wall Street Journal published, but almost no one else covered. Okay. Yeah, ability to recover depends how much damage they do. The concerning thing is the one in California. To power, you take down the grid, you can power it back up, but you got to talk to people saying, okay, I'm powering up this power plant again. You need to shut down here and here and here so I don't try to power up the whole East Coast at the same time. You have to have telecommunications. They cut a fiber optics cable that was buried in a concrete vault. I think this is more serious than most people realize. This is what you would do on a large scale if you wanted to really hurt the country. Oh yes, electromagnetic pulse. We have all heard about this one. There's another video here. Okay, that's not good. Now, if we're talking about a country sending a nuclear warhead over the United States, there's other things going on than that. I think it's the least likely scenario, but people have certainly heard about it. And it is tied in with coronal mass ejection, some of the same phenomena. Congress certainly knows. I got this book. This is a compilation of hearings that Congress had on the electromagnetic pulse and also reports on it. They certainly are aware of the problem. And it's interesting, it's a boring read, and lots of it is repetitive. Now, the thing is, he kind of overstated it. He said all the electronics, actually not true. Many of the electronics are already hard, and it turns out that we have so many electronics emitting signals all the time that they do start protecting the electronic circuits just because they have to, just so your alarm clock doesn't go off at 2 o'clock in the morning if somebody else turns on an LED light somewhere. Actually, and you may not know this, but you might remember the Falklands War. The HMS Sheffield was lost because of electromagnetic interference was so bad they were trying to communicate with Britain was trying to communicate with its jets that it turned down some of its electronic countermeasures. And that's when the Argentines were able to fire the missile and hit the Sheffield. And so they're actually, they take this very seriously. Still, the grid will probably go down. Yes, I just think it's the least likely scenario, but certainly you've heard about it, so let's cover it. Fuel shortages. Like I said, I was paying attention. This has actually happened in the past. During the cold snap in 2011, there was not enough natural gas in Texas. They had dozens of power plants that had to go offline because they didn't have enough natural gas to fuel them. Then they had to do rotating blackouts. In fact, they had to cut off some natural gas customers. Some people lost their heat because in Texas and in New Mexico and Arizona, because there wasn't enough natural gas to handle the extreme cold. And restarting natural gas service is much more difficult than restarting electricity. You got to make sure that someone didn't have their oven on, as an old oven. The new ones have some protection, but still you don't know. Before you restart the natural gas, you had to go house by house by house. And you've been there when power has been restored. It's power up blocks at a time. And here, this is what I want to show you. You may or may not be aware of this. This is concerning to me. There's a lot here, but the main thing I want to show, the blue line is the amount of natural gas that is used to generate electricity. The black line, of course, is coal. Just a few years ago, a lot of coal was used compared to natural gas. Now it's going the other way. We're using more natural gas than coal. Coal is a dirty fuel. I'm not arguing that. But coal, you can stockpile 2 months worth of coal at a power plant. You don't have to worry about a cold snap, affecting your supplies. You always can have coal. We're concentrating more and more on natural gas. And we're producing a little bit more, but not that much more. This is how much natural gas we have in storage. This is a recent chart. I'll explain a little bit. This is the average for the past 5 years. This is how much of a variation we had 5 years ago was the polar vortex. So the amount that we had in storage started going way down. Fortunately, it didn't continue, but you see, we were getting fairly close to zero. The problem is we're not starting from up here. Winter's starting, it's staying cold, and we're low already. Now, President Trump, I think, and a couple people in his administration realize this, but nothing's really happening. We're still closing down coal-fired power plants. The two just east of here in Adams County closed down this year. Again, I'm not saying coal isn't dirty, it is, but it seems like we're shutting them down faster than we're getting new natural gas supplies. So if this winter is much colder than normal, long-range forecast says it won't be, but they can be wrong, we could be in trouble. Another reason, someone asked me earlier before this started about natural gas generators. Well, if you have the natural gas, that'd be great. I don't know, I can't promise you that you will. So hacking, ooh. Of course, we all heard about our accounts being hacked, at, what was it, Target? Target is the one that affected me, stealing the credit cards. Well, it seems like they also are trying utilities. There's been some cases. There was a utility in Ukraine. There's been a couple other ones that you hear about. If you really dig, where it looks like they were exploring, seeing what they could do in terms of hacking. This Business Week had a story. I don't know how many of you get Bloomberg Business Week. They had a story a few weeks ago. They found that the Chinese were adding some very, very small chips to the chips that were being made in China that appear to be acting as a back door to Lovely, so that they can get in and control our microprocessors that we bought from China. This may be why President Trump is so dead set against all of our critical technology being made in China. I don't know if we can really trust them. We're vulnerable that way. And as I point out at the end, the worst case scenario would probably be, I think, a cyber attack, hacking, combined with a physical attack. If they were to destroy a sizable number of our large transformers that we no longer make and we don't have on the shelf, it could take a long time to get power fully restored. There's some examples of hacking. I couldn't find out actually who these were involved. I mean, what utilities, but it did apparently happen. They just say unnamed U.S. utility. That's on one of the reports. And certainly the presidents, both Obama and Trump, have issued executive orders that concentrate on this, and we got to be prepared. Again, our government leaders are clearly aware of these threats, but I do not know why they aren't talking to us about them. Do they not? Maybe they don't want to scare us. I don't know. Sure.
Our friends
Sure.
watching online. Could you say your first name? Ask the question.
Sure. I'm Ken, and the question that I had, it's kind of escaping me at the moment.
About our congressional leaders?
Come back to you, what you were just saying, please.
Oh, I was talking about the congressional leaders and Trump, the president.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they clearly know that there's a threat out there.
Well, I saw a presentation on the Mark Levin show,
Okay.
and it was also on the electrical grid.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked the fella there, and I forget his name, but he's an international figure in this. And he said, yeah, we've talked to all of the administrations over the past number of administrations about this. And that Mark asked him, he said, well, what was their response? And he said, well, when we got to one of the administrations, they said that when we started talking nuclear, that it just turned them off. He said, well, how would you rate Trump? And he said, A+. So now, it was about a month after that, President Trump announced the Space Force.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to connect the two together. Do you have any comments on that particular issue at this point? Because maybe it's too early.
I hadn't thought of the Space Force in that connection. Clearly, I have looked at his executive order, and he's demanding reports, most of which are classified. So obviously, I won't see them. And I will talk about this. Okay, I just covered what I thought were the most significant possibilities for losing electrical power, especially in the Cincinnati area. When I started this, I could not find somebody who anything that brought them all together like I just did now, and also trying to put some kind of time scale on it. Now, the next part of this, I'm talking about FEMA. I went to the FEMA.gov. Everyone knows about FEMA. Well, this is what they talk about for the basic emergency kit. 3 days. It's like, wait a minute here. We're talking, you have another report that says we could lose power for months, years before we get it fully restored, and your emergency kit is 3 days. Now, there's some good suggestions as to what to put in it. Certainly, medicines, for instance, make sure you got medicines, but I thought it was inadequate. So
We're getting internet and garbled.
And also say, the basic kit should be.
Last time we did it was perfect.
Other people are saying 2 weeks.
It's got to be internet. I don't know what other variables. It sounds okay.
But I think there has to be a government response. I don't think it's going to happen in 3 days. 2 weeks means that I think there could start being food supplies being brought in, but it's not going to happen in 3 days. Now this is some of my ideas, and I've actually used some of these. Okay, one of them, I was just talking to Betty about it. FEMA says flashlight. It's like, you ever try lighting a room with a flashlight? It doesn't work very well. I say get a couple of these, portable lanterns, and have them. By the way, I test all my stuff once a year during some very cold snowstorm or something. I get in the mood, I put that movie on the day after tomorrow, and I go and test.
Mike, we're going to have to switch it to this other mic. We're not getting a good feed on this mic. So sorry.
Good. Okay. So I just like this. Okay. And I the flashlights and lanterns. I light a couple oil lanterns. Make sure everything works once a year. Go through some other preparations. I also say get a battery-powered TV. I got this at a truck stop. Truckers, long-distance truckers, will still have battery-powered TVs. obviously, you know, when they pull over for the night. Don't count on the internet. The internet could go down. During 2008, Hurricane Ike, I actually had, not this one, but had another one that was in the old format. And I had that powered up within about a half hour after I lost power. And I turned into, I think it was channel 19. And the first thing I heard was this guy saying, power's down all over the city. We're running on emergency generators. I don't know if anybody's listening to my broadcast. I do recommend getting one of those. FEMA says 1 gallon per day. They're talking about potable water. Come on. You're not going to flush. What are you going to do with it? I'm sorry, I got to be basic here, you know, but what are you going to do about flushing the toilet if you have no water? So get some done. It doesn't have to be potable. Get extra water supplies. I already talked about this with my neighbor. He has an in-ground swimming pool, you know, and so, and you just got to think about this. If you don't have that, maybe you can stack some water in your garage. Don't use 5-gallon buckets. I tried that. The plastic gets very stiff. The last time my water went out, I thought, hey, I got water in the basement. Tried pulling up the lid. I had to use a plier to break that dang lid. And I had to break it into like 10 pieces before I could get at the water, because 5-gallon buckets are made with cheap plastic and it becomes stiff over the years. Get one with a screw top lid, or make an arrangement for some other means of having water. Oh, a window ventilator. No, it got buried here. Just a minute. I bought several of these. This is the case, the summertime. This is louvered. You put this underneath a sash. What does this do for you? Well, it means that you can keep the sash up. You get some air in under the sash. You got a screen to keep the bugs out. And you can leave it there during the day, even if it rains there, because the louvers prevent the rain from coming in. And it also has some privacy. People can't see in. And I do find that really does help. But there's a lot of weeks in Cincinnati when you can use these. You don't have to run the air conditioning. As you see over here, this is on my second floor window. I got the louvers there, got Venetian blinds. You can't see in. You can just leave it there. Then I was thinking about the worst realistic case. We saw some pretty bad cases there, but it's not doom. It's not what's sometimes called Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it. Remember, my mother grew up without electricity, you know. Just accept the fact that we can do it. The country's been through, if this does happen, it won't be the worst thing that ever happened to this country, not by any means. And I was thinking, what would probably be the worst case? It'd be something like an attack, or maybe the coronal mass ejection that would wipe out a large part of the grid. FEMA said 5 to 10 years to get it fully restored, but I think what will happen is that you'll get some of it restored, and you probably have rotating service after a few months. As the transformers starting to come in, maybe someone's damaged. So this is what I'm thinking. I'm saying, of course, the federal and state government will continue. I'm not sure about city government. This isn't a slam against Cincinnati. It's just a recognition that in Hamilton County, there's like 50 different local governments here in Hamilton County. I don't think the federal government will have the manpower to deal with each of them. They will probably just say, Hamilton County, you're going to be the point of contact. And like I said, government clearly knows about the possibility. I showed you that one report on the electromagnetic pulse. Oh, I've read a whole bunch of reports here, a few more that I've read. You can find dozens of these on the internet, different aspects. You will not find a government plan in any detail. I don't know why. So I had to start from somewhere. You know, what is going to be the government response? What are they going to do? Going to, of course, national defense, rebuild the grid. And this is just so you, how do you prepare? You got to, like I said, start from somewhere, otherwise you suffer from what's called analysis paralysis. So I think after a couple of weeks, there are vast warehouses in the Midwest, Kroger's, you know, all the supermarkets have them. You know, we'll be able to get staples at least out of these food warehouses. Fresh fruits and vegetables, not so likely, because they depend on electricity to preserve or large-scale transportation to move in from California or even overseas. Residential high-rises are going to be a problem. And I'm talking here about New York City. I don't know what they're going to do about New York City. I don't see how you can keep that place running without electricity. I don't see how you can get food and water to that place. But here, we should be in relatively safe shape. We got a lot of the food warehouses. We grow food here. We've got water. I think we'll be in relatively good shape. So some things that I talk about, you know, just a FEMA kit, 2 weeks, some of my other suggestions, make some kind of provision for cooking, super insulate your house. Be nice if you're building new. Seasonal clothing, think about that. You know, there used to be something called a seersucker suit. Oh, you might remember that name. That was a special weave that was designed to breathe better, you know, before we had air conditioning everywhere. Electrical generation capacity, this is a tough one. I don't have a good answer. I was going to say solar. I'm working myself towards putting in some solar modules, a couple solar modules. I've taken a class at Cincinnati State. And I was going to recommend a magazine where you could learn more. Unfortunately, that magazine just went out. This is the last issue. I just got this yesterday. There'll still be something online. They said issues online, but for really knowing about solar energy, you got to educate yourself, or else you just stick to 12 volts and don't go higher than that. To 12 volts, you won't kill yourself. I was talking about supplies of fuel. Again, that's natural gas. I don't know if it's going to be available. Gasoline, you need electricity to pump gasoline out of the ground. Diesel, same thing. Propane. Propane's good, but its availability is limited. We're one of the calmest areas of the country. Don't even think about wind energy as a primary source. So that's why I myself have decided on solar. But that may not be the right answer. I'll admit that. Okay. Preparation again for long blackout. Water. Again, water is more important than electricity to human life. Learn how to vegetable garden. I think the basics food will be there. Wheat, potatoes, corn, but vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables, no. Learn to garden. That's something else I'm doing. Getting good hand tools. Some concluding remarks. I think long blackouts are certainly possible. Sooner or later, we're going to have weeks-long blackouts. It's either going to be a coronal mass ejection, it's going to be a fuel shortage, it's going to be somebody who really wants to hurt us, I think we already saw some demonstration of that in California. But it's better to think ahead of time, be prepared. Don't go overboard. This is not moving to Idaho. I'm different here than anybody else. FEMA says 3 days. Other people say move to a mountain in Idaho. I'm saying, wait a minute here. I don't think we need to do that. I think there's a way in between. If you can't do this yourself because you live in an apartment, you can do some of it. Find somebody that you can work with on this. Maybe I think you should need to keep your preparations private and quiet. You don't want to advertise the fact that, hey, I got a generator and you don't. I don't think that would be good. Be active in some kind of group that cooperates with and supports one another. And this is so not just to show that, find out who you can trust. This is so other people know that they can trust you. And I was trying to think of some of these groups. Certainly a faith community comes to mind. Don't just show up, get in to the service, do some stuff. Your family, especially if you have a large one, community garden. Bill and I met at a variety show, putting together some show every year. Stuff like that. So strong personal relationships, I believe, will be the key. And I think that's, yes, and I got a bunch of references and notes for anyone who, I back up what I can, So any questions?
Here's a question right here.
It's Ken again. Freeze-dried food. What is your take on that?
Okay, I have some, not a lot. 2 weeks freeze-dried food for myself, a few other people. I looked around, I tasted, I've been buying Mountain House. I will give you the brand name. You can get it at Cabela's. But the problem is, and this is only temporary, it's impossible for one person or one group of people to stock up with enough food for themselves for any length of time. Oh, you see the show, National Geographic, Doomsday Preppers. It's a lot of fun. Is it realistic? No, because they always fail. They might have enough food, but they don't have enough water. In my scenario, as I said, I really think, and I do believe this, is the government working with private industry will make sure there's food distribution, will start growing food again. This is when the electricity is going up. They'll get it going again, but it will take a little bit of time. What we need is food to bridge. But don't think in terms of getting food for 5 years. You're not going to do it. You're not going to get enough water to do it. And if you did, you're just going to make yourself a target. Those are my thoughts.
Question, does natural gas rely on electricity to generate?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So without the electrical grid, there's no gas?
Yes.
Here's a question over here. That's too bad.
It'll take some time, but it does rely on it.
My name is Georgia,
Yes.
and I noticed you didn't say anything about the dangers of nuclear energy and a disruption to the grid. Now, it's my understanding that this is the first priority of the government to keep the nuclear energy from proliferating, and that takes all the oil supplies.
Do you mean, okay, I guess I'm not quite, I'm not sure about your,
If you have a nuclear energy plant in the neighborhood,
yes.
and the grid goes out, and they can't create nuclear, you cannot use it. They have to keep it from exploding.
Well, yes, you're right, and that's what happened at Fukushima. It wasn't the nuclear power plant itself that was damaged by the tsunami. It was the fact that they lost the connection to the power grid, and they had backup generators, but in an act of cost-cutting, they put the backup generators next to the ocean, so it was the backup generators that got swamped by the tsunami, and then they could no longer keep the nuclear power plant, the reactor core from overheating and melting down. You're right. There is a tie-in. I did not cover nuclear energy because I said Cincinnati area. There's no nuclear power plants within about 300 miles of Cincinnati. So Cincinnati itself will be okay, but that is a big concern. You're right. If you're next to a nuclear power plant.
I also would like to say that you talked about what to do about water.
Yes.
During the winter of 66 and 67,
Yes.
we were without water for an entire month.
Were you?
I had 3 children, farm animals, and what we used, one of the main things is we put these 5-gallon buckets in the basement empty.
Yes.
And we use that for our toilet. That was a major way of surviving.
Okay. There are ways around this.
What happened to the water? What happened?
We were on cistern, and the cistern froze.
Oh.
And we couldn't get it. We had electricity, but we couldn't get the cistern unfrozen for a whole month. And also our pipes burst, and we were somewhat isolated. We were away from the road, and the plumbers were all too busy with other problems, and we couldn't get them. I had to learn how to fix pipes.
It's a good skill to have. And you bring up a good point. You know, my suggestions are only the ways that I've thought of what I want to do. Again, it helps because I have a neighbor with an in-ground swimming pool. I think I found an old cistern in my yard. I'm looking at it right now, see if it's still usable. Because if it is, I'm going to hook it back up to the downspout, and then that will also be another supply of water. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sandy,
Yes.
and I've been wondering about the money end of all this. Like a lot of people don't carry around cash anymore.
Yes.
And you were talking about people getting food here. Would we have to pay for that with cash, or they give it to us free, or what happens when nobody has any cash?
Boy, that's a good question, and I don't know. I have some cash. FEMA recommends some cash. You find people who recommend silver coins, the old U.S. silver coins, 1964 and before. Avoid gold coins. Why? Because if you want to go and buy something and all you have is a $10 gold coin, all of a sudden that thing's going to cost you $10 in gold. But if you just have some silver dimes, you might get out of there, a lot cheaper. I really think in times of urgent need, what people do, again, this is building on your relationships. They will call I think it's the gift economy. It's like, I'll take care of you for right now. We'll do this for you. Sometime when you can, you pay back me with some good deed. And you're not keeping a strict tally, but sooner or later you find out who the deadbeat is. You want to get a jump start on that by finding out whom you can trust ahead of time. And again, showing that you can be trusted. So those are my thoughts on that.
Other questions for our speaker? Who's got one? We'll get Ken over.
Ken. Well, we can talk afterwards too.
Yeah, okay. Which countries in the world do they have the capability to launch and explode the nuclear bomb? I put down Russia, China, North Korea, and the United States.
Explode and launch? I mean, Russia.
Iran's not there yet.
Probably not. Israel, well, we certainly hope that they're not responsible. I mean, they wouldn't do anything like that. India, Pakistan, They have the capabilities.
Oh, they do.
Yes, they do. France and Britain both have the capability. Those are the ones that I can think of.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned about solar flares
Yes,
and how widespread they are.
yes.
In the case of a nuclear bomb
Yes.
being exploded, is there any correlation between the size of the bomb and the height of the explosion,
Yes.
and how much of that affects the grids?
Yes, there is. Exactly what I don't know. They say you need to get about 100 kilometers up before you start getting this electromagnetic pulse effect. As you get up higher, yes, you can cover a wider area. And the video we saw, the guy was talking about towards the horizon, you know, so that's important, but it also gets weaker as time goes on. The one thing that I saw was talking kind of like if North Korea were to launch a EMP attack, it would probably have the same effect as Hurricane Katrina. They would not be able to take out all of the United States, but it would still be a significant chunk, at least with one bomb. Of course, if they did that, we're going to retaliate.
Yeah, you can't, first of all.
Yeah.
Well, so it doesn't necessarily cover a continent. It covers a more restricted area than a total, like the northern continent. We have an east and west grid in Canada that has the same grid that we do and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's the grid, it's the line of sight. It's not going to, you know, how much you can only go to the horizon. The effect, it won't go over the horizon. And then if it was a couple thousand miles up, it would not, it would be as strong. And as I said, it comes as some surprise, but they actually have done studies, like I said, that there was so much electromagnetic interference when they started making microelectronics that they started designing some robustness into all the devices. They did not find that the cars would totally fail. A lot of cars will continue to operate. I don't remember what they said about airplanes. I don't want to find out. But you know, airplanes probably do have some protection because of lightning strikes. They do get lightning strikes in mid-air, and it travels through the plane, and with composites, is no longer get the Faraday cage effect, which means that the charge goes on the outside of the plane. They do think about these things. It's not as bad as some people say. I mean, those movies that the movie I referenced, which was that, Red Dawn, the remake, and also the show Jericho. Jericho's a good show. I enjoyed it. They probably went overboard and the effect of the EMP.
Other questions for our speaker? Right over here.
My name is Don, and I recall a while back, I believe there was a brownout in New York State, and then it spread to other states via electric lines.
There were a couple of them, yes.
And have we made progress in maybe having emergency devices that would break the connections between the power lines so it wouldn't spread wide?
Yes, they're supposed to be there. They did not all work. Again, it was a soft. I mentioned that a little bit. I think I didn't talk about it. I think it's in the slides. So, human error, yes. Hot August day in 2003, a high voltage line contact an overgrown tree caused a wide-scale blackout. The reason they were able to get the grid back up is because those things did protect most of the grid from damage. The safety's tripped. And so the transformers, everything that was important was safe. The problem is resetting them. And this goes back to what I was saying about the importance of telecommunication. They were able to call up different people and say, okay, we're going to restart this power plant, we're going to reset here. You know, you need to do this, this, and this. Well, after a few days, the telecommunication lines, if they're still up, they start losing battery backup power. And you see that sometimes after a hurricane, the cell tower will transmit for a few days, and then the cell tower loses battery power, and then no one can make a cell phone call anymore. So you got to restart within a few days. If you don't restart within a few days and you start losing all your telecommunications, then we could be in more serious trouble. You're going to be sending people out in cars or maybe bicycles and telling them, you know, what to do, and then it's going to take much longer. We can still do it. It's just going to be more difficult and take longer. And this is why that attack in California bothers me so much, because they cut fiber optics line. There was no need to do that if you're just attacking the transformer substation. It was, I think it was a demonstration that they knew where we were vulnerable, and they were demonstrating it.
Let me ask a question for those of you willing to answer. How many people here have a week's supply of everything you need to keep you going? Raise your hand.
I don't have my wood stove yet, but other than that.
That's pretty good. I'd say about half. We had a speaker in an EmpowerU session from Hamilton County Emergency Systems a couple years ago. We probably need to have them back, and it was very, very interesting. Well, let's thank our guests for coming, Michael Patton. And he put so much time into this presentation. We really appreciate you coming. And
I enjoyed it.
Michael, how often do you write for Street Vibes?
It had been like almost every issue, but I'm backing off a little bit, so it might be once a month now.
If you're ever downtown, every time I go downtown, I get a copy of Street Vibes, and it's just a great thing because people that are struggling sell it, and you might kind of think it's a scam. People might come up to you and say, will you buy a Street Vibe? Is it like $2?
It's $2, and of course the idea is so that people who are having trouble, that they're not just begging, that have something to sell that hopefully will be enjoyable to read, but it's also a chance for interaction, you know, that they give you a chance to talk to the person. Well, I mean, I have a friend who is a Street Vibes vendor, for instance, you know.
Well, that's a great thing. If you're down there, somebody says, would you buy a newspaper? Try to support them. So let's thank Michael again one more time. I've got a great American in the audience tonight, Mr. Bill Kittner, an old friend of mine, and we've done a lot of stuff. And Michael, do you remember Bill from our work back in 2005? Raise your hand right there.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
So we're glad,
glad
to see you, Bill.
I think I might even still have your name in my cell phone. Never deleted it.
So Monday night, President Lincoln at EmpowerU. It's going to be a great night. Thanks so much to Creative Therapy for sponsoring tonight's session. If we miss you Monday night, have a great Thanksgiving, and thank you for coming.
And I'll hang around a little bit too.
It's okay for us to put your PowerPoint, Michael, is it okay for us to put your PowerPoint up online? So we'll put the PowerPoint up online for any of you who want to see it. It'll be, give us 24 hours to do that.
I just want to say one thing. You will notice on the PowerPoint, it doesn't have my name on it. It has Alan Smithy. That's kind of an inside joke from the motion picture industry. Alan Smithy was used by directors. If they weren't just claiming credit, they just didn't want a name out with it. You saw some things there that I was thought might be a little sensitive. I didn't know where this was going to go. I don't want somebody taking this, hooking it up with Benghazi and saying, you know, Michael Patton saying this. So that's why I'm using the name Alan Smithy. My real name is Michael Patton. I'll show you my driver's license if you want to see it.
Thank you, everybody.